I'm Philip Mortlock, and I'm a good friend of those lovely boys in INXS, and I'm here with you on Access All Areas.
Hello, welcome to INXS Access All Areas, episode 68, where we dive deep into the awesomeness of this band INXS, bring them towards the Hall of Fame along with our community, and just have a good old gas bag every week or so. B, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I am
You haven't
good.
heard the word gas bag for a while, have you?
Gas bag is very English, that, isn't it?
Well, something my mother taught me when I grew up, having a good old chin wag or a gas bag.
Yes.
Yeah.
What?
No.
I'm very excited. We've been talking all day, I feel. It's been quite an exciting day, hasn't it?
We've done a bit of pre-production work and stuff like that. So if this sounds even less professional than normal, I hope that may be in vain. But as always, how's your INXS week been, B? I know it was a busy editing weekend last week. You got a bit stressed last week in editing, didn't you?
I did. You gave me some really kind words. Thank you for that. I was about to smash my computer up.
Didn't you ask for the kind words?
Please say something nice to me.
I think you did, yeah. Yeah, kudos.
And you did. You come back. Yeah, 2 hours of editing after it had gone out. So, yeah, let's not go there. Anyway.
That's okay. But how's your week been anyway? You're always working on something.
Yeah, the weekend was good because we live streamed with Nick Egan, which was really nice, really good. So I think there was about 10 of us in total from the patrons. Got a couple of new ones coming on straight away, which was really good. And I presented Nick with the awards for silver and gold. I'm just in the process of making it into a movie, so I'll pop it out. You're going to love it, Hayden.
Wow.
It's Star Wars-esque. You're going to love it.
So you've got a bit of George Martin producer in you. Now you've got a bit of George Lucas movie maker in you. Okay? I'm going to call you George. Yeah?
George. I don't know where that comes from. But only yesterday I was doing, because of COVID, you have to do a lot of these Zoom meeting things now, don't you? And because of Dad's health, I was talking to this guy called David. I don't know how I got my podcast talked about, but I did. And he said, I used to work in Sydney for a pest control company. He says, and I saw a famous name written down. And he was at Andrew Ferris's house doing pest control, but Andrew never let on. He was trying to hint, I like INXS music, but he wasn't having a bar of it. So I thought that was quite funny. So hi to David.
Philip Mortlock, very welcome to you coming on to INXS Access All Areas. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Look, we were just doing a little bit of ad-libbing before, I guess, the real record, but you did ask a very interesting question about, the Hall of Fame pursuit, and we were about to say it is a highly political organisation. I think my research on you is that you were a former board member of ARIA, is that right?
Yes, I sat on the board of ARIA for 10 years.
Yes, which I guess for those listeners who don't know, that probably has a Hall of Fame component to it, doesn't it?
Oh, it certainly does. And in fact, INXS have been inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame. So that box is ticked.
Yes.
But the US Hall of Fame, or Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was established, many years ago, and they've got a lot of money poured into this organisation, and it's got a home in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then there's this annual jockeying for who should be nominated and who should be inducted and all that sort of thing, and everybody's got an opinion on it. And there's obviously a lot of politics that goes on behind the scenes. So one can only imagine, how complex the process is. But yeah, my feeling is that of course, like you, thinking that INXS should have been inducted by now.
Yes, surely.
So yes, and I suspect that the people that we should be lobbying, and I've actually made some inquiries, in the last couple of days just to sort of do my bit.
Thank you.
Well, so INXS's catalogue is with Universal throughout the world. And they are one of the big players in the business, of course. But in the States, Warner Music, with their label Rhino Records, manages the band's catalogue up until I think X or thereabouts. So basically, INXS signed to Atlantic Records in America, and Canada when we got involved when I was at Warner's back in the early 80s. And so Warner still owns the catalogue in the US for most of those major albums that the band released. So Warner's could be influential as well, it being the American Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I've sent off a few emails to some people that I know at Warner's and some people that I know at Universal, and we'll see. I mean, I haven't got any news for you at this stage?
No, but that's great. That is brilliant. That's made me smile so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. We needed someone like you to help us out with this.
Well, the interesting thing, of course, is that, the great champion for INXS for many years was Chris Murphy, who was their manager. And unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. So it's hard to know whether he had ever... knowing Chris, I'm sure, he's a tenacious bastard and he would have worked very hard to get things like this across the line. In fact, I'm surprised that he didn't,
Yeah.
But maybe he was busy doing other things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we always seem to have an agenda, and I think getting the rights to the catalogue back and sort of, going from band to brand and all these particular initiatives, I think the musical, mini-series, all these things, he always had a project. So you always got the feeling that there was always an agenda. And I think from even him passing, there's a 5-year post-Chris plan in the works.
There's a plan, a 5-year plan.
As you would probably know, he's either up there in heaven or down there in hell, having a great time. Probably with Michael, but I think that, he definitely left a legacy 5-year plan, with people like Sam Evans and people behind the scenes, post his departure, So maybe that is part of it. You think it would be,
So what do you think's got to happen then, Philip? What do you think the process should be?
Well, it's like any of these sort of political scenarios. You've got to lobby, and you've got to have the right people lobbying for things. So, as I say, it's probably best to go straight to the labels who have the most influence over that process.
Okay.
I'm
Because us being fans, I don't think we've really got a voice. We can make noise, which is what we're trying to do, and get more fans together as a community to make that noise. Why aren't we there? And we were talking about Dr. Chim has got the petition going, but I think from a professional and from other musicians, that's where we need the push, and we can't do that unless we can reach out to you guys to help us.
Look, the sad fact is that, statistics often are the most influential thing that you can have in pushing an agenda like this. And the statistics on the success of the band are there for everybody to see, and they continue. I mean, the great thing is that like a lot of other so-called heritage artists in this world that we live in now, there's more going on with artists like INXS and their catalogue than there are with new and developing artists.
Yeah.
Because they have, this is the beauty of the streaming world. It is it's sort of opened up a whole new way for the industry to manage and foster the ongoing interest in an artist's repertoire, and the thing I love about all this is that, that in the INXS catalogue, along with all these other artists that I'm sort of loosely referring to, are finding new audiences every day.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about, a greying old audience that, used to be fans of INXS and are sort of still hanging on to it. Yes, they're there still, but there's a whole new generation of fans that come on board and discover INXS and other bands like them or other artists like them, and that will continue. And I think that's the wonderful new sort of brave new world that we're in.
Well, I think one of the things which is quite interesting is that by virtue, you don't have to really go off and manufacture the music, i.e. tapes, CDs, 8 tracks, all those type vinyl. You don't have to really manufacture the actual music anymore. I mean, the song is there in a sort of a digital sort of platform that can be reignited through these streaming platforms.
It's sad that we don't have a physical product as much dominating the scenario as much because, for me in particular, I got into this industry because I loved album cover art, and
which I can't wait to talk about.
And I still think that's relevant, but you're right. The streaming has made, the best thing about it is it's made the music more accessible. So anybody can access music whenever they want and everything is there, practically everything that you ever wanted to listen to, whether you've just found out about something that was recorded and released in 1920 or 2020, it's all there. And for the meager price of a subscription, you can access it, in any which way you want. So that's great. But the physical product itself is still attached to what an artist values as their art, so that's not going to go away. Our artists want to make albums because they are, I've used it's a crass analogy, but I've used it many times. It's like a painter doing a whole bunch of paintings and then deciding either by themselves or with the help of a curator to then select the paintings that are good out of what they've done and then put on an exhibition. So the album is the exhibition. And if you think about an artist like INXS, they had cycles where they would make albums, then they would go on tour, then they would make an album, then they would go on tour. And somewhere in amongst all of that, they would write songs.
Yeah.
And, that's the interesting thing when you look back at a career of a band like INXS and see, as you've obviously done, forensically looking at, each album and what the results were of those albums and how did they manage to do that in amongst everything else that was going on.
Yeah.
It's
I'd like to give sort of due acknowledgement to your career, Philip, because I think for our listeners, this is also an education, a little bit about the backdrop of how it is you came to work with the band. But I know, and again, loose research, but I think you were at sort of Warner's or WA for about 17, 18 years, so around the mid-70s to about 92. Does that sound right to you?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and look, obviously a very vital time, and I guess for some of our listeners, I think you've worked and had involvement with artists ranging from Cold Chisel, Richard Clapton, Gaudier, Lior, Jenny Morris, Icehouse, Boom Crash Opera, 1927, Mental as Anything. Some I think you work with on your current Origin sort of label now, and then some back in the day when you were probably with Warner's, I assume. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
So what do you call yourself? You've got lots of little hats going on, or big hats, I should say.
Well, I don't have it's hard to say. But look, the thing that I've enjoyed through the process and continue to do so right now is that I kind of see myself as the creative middleman. So you've got commerce and you've got art, and then I'm sort of like the go-between between the two. So that's how I've sort of seen my role, so to speak. It's not an official sort of title that I can give myself, but I've always seen the value in what people do creatively. And then through the work that I've done, getting jobs in record companies and then becoming my own business and learning about publishing and licensing and all the other aspects of the sort of the administrative side of the business.
I think in the 70s and 80s, that word, and probably 90s, A&R man seems to either have shivers up the spine of some artists, and it also seems to actually be real positive depending on the band and the A&R guy, I guess, Yeah,
that's true. But, I actually avoided
that
being
title.
the A&R. Yeah, because to me, I observed fairly early on that it was a revolving door and that A&R people come and go. My official title for many years at Warner's, certainly when I started working with INXS, was Creative Services, and I was the Creative Services Manager within the organisation. And it was a blissful scenario for me to be floating around the business at the time, because we had this influx of amazing artists and repertoire coming in from the US labels. The UK company was kicking in with a whole lot of fantastic signings like Elvis Costello and the Pretenders and many others. So it was. I mean, the company was the market leader at the time because of the amazing influx of international product that we had from Warner Brothers, Elektra, and Atlantic and Asylum, the main labels that Warner's is. And then locally, we managed to build up a fantastic roster of Australian talent. And a lot of the activities that sort of happened through those years and through that process were sort of opening and closing doors, or the classic sliding doors scenario where, things. So I'm often caught using the phrase "one thing leads to another" in this business. I can usually put it down to how did that happen? Well, because this happened, and then the knock-on effect was this, and then that, and so forth. The thing I like about using the phrase "one thing leads to another" is that my relationship with INXS started with one thing, literally. It didn't quite start with that. So we were very fortunate in that we had worked with Cole Chisel for many years. Cole Chisel was signed to Warner's when I was still in the art department there. That was in 1977. And then I was promoted out of the art department to be a PR person. So for the next couple of years, I did PR. And I worked Cole Chisel's records, to radio and press and all that sort of thing, and amongst other artists and many other things going on. But, Cole Chisel to me was like a big, sharp learning curve for me about what it's like to work with an Australian band and go from, standstill position to being one of the biggest acts in the market. Mm. And the interesting thing about that, as an aside, is, of course, Cole Chisel, they were huge and still are. Their catalogue is still, highly active in this day and age. But unfortunately, they never broke overseas. So lesson learned, there was one of many great Australian bands that, that the tyranny of distance and whatever else you want to put it down to never quite broke outside of Australia. And I had a great relationship with the band's members and I worked with them on their album covers and their videos and their marketing and so forth. So Don Walker from the band got asked by an Adelaide filmmaker called Scott Hicks to do the score for his first feature film, which was called Freedom. Mm. And so, long story short, Warner's committed to putting the soundtrack album out that Don had recorded. And he'd recorded the album essentially with the members of Cole Chisel, but not with Jimmy Barnes singing. He got Michael Hutchence to sing a couple of the songs that were in the score. I ended up having a meeting as the creative services manager by this stage for Warner's with Chris Murphy and Michael Hutchence about the song that Michael sings on the soundtrack called Speed Kills. And we were planning to put that out as a single. And Scott Hicks, the filmmaker who had made the feature film, had shot a video of Michael. I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but it's pretty cool.
In the sort of car junkyard.
In the junkyard,
right. Yeah. So this was the first solo thing that Michael did outside of INXS. And I had seen INXS a couple of times as a support act to Cole Chisel. That's how I first saw them. So the Cole Chisel connection was how I got to meet these guys. And I'm having a meeting with Michael and Chris talking about releasing the Speed Kills song as a single to go with the soundtrack. And Chris basically opens up and says he's frustrated with Australian record companies and he's been with this independent label, but they just haven't been able to break the band, outside of Australia, and they've done a pretty poor job here in Australia. And would Warner's be interested in INXS? I mean, I'm pretty sure from that moment that I met Chris that day that I was being played, but that's because he was a very shrewd businessman. And I think he sort of basically set in his sights that Warner's would be a good place, considering how well we were doing with Cole Chisel and many other Australian bands, for INXS to land. So that's where the conversation started. I introduced him to the managing director of the company at the time, Paul Turner, and the new A&R guy at the time, a guy called Gibson Kemp. Now, interestingly, Gibson had just replaced Mark Opitz, who was the A&R manager at Warner.
Of course, yeah. They just missed, remember saying that.
Just missed, no. Basically, Paul Turner, my boss at the time, was pissed off with Mark Opitz for what he referred to as moonlighting, as in spending all his time in the studio producing and not being in the office being an A&R guy. So they essentially came to an impasse and said, well, you can't do both. And Mark said, well, I have to be in the studio because I'm in demand and that's what I want to do. So Mark left, and then Warner's then hired Gibson to be the new A&R guy. Gibson was a British guy who had moved to Australia a few years before, had worked previously with Polygram Records in the in Europe. Anyway, so he and Chris Murphy and Paul Turner then arm wrestled over the deal that they were doing for INXS to sign with Warner's. And the intention was that INXS would sign to Warner's in Australia for the world. But Chris, being the shrewd businessman that he is, that he would say, well, I need guarantees. And so he was insisting that Warner's guarantee releases in every market in the world, and that they guarantee marketing investment in developing the band across the world. And so then Warner's Australia then had to convince its affiliates around the world and also to find one of the US labels that would be interested in picking up these commitments. Otherwise, we weren't going to get a world deal. So long story short is that Warner's Australia couldn't guarantee the kind of things that Chris was demanding. So Warner's Australia signed INXS to a licensing deal for Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia and Japan. Through the introduction to Atlantic, INXS did a deal with Atlantic's ATCO label, an offshoot of Atlantic, run by a lady called Reen Nally. So she got it. She saw the value or the prospect of INXS, and so she pushed for Atlantic to sign INXS for US and Canada. And then by this stage, Gibson, still working for Warner's, thought, well, if Warner's Europe are stupid enough not to look at the opportunity that they have, I'll tip off my friends at Polygram. And so Polygram ended up doing a separate deal for the rest of the world. So Chris ended up with a perfect scenario.
Perfect, yeah.
You had three different major entities investing in the band's international development, which means he also had three sources of income. Wow. So when you do a deal like the ones that he did with the three different companies, he's got, buckets of money coming in to support the marketing and promotion of the band's repertoire in each market.
Ultimately
each continent.
Help fund the touring and just all the sort of starting again process, especially in the US in probably 82, 83, didn't it?
Oh, yes. And look, the great thing about that from his and the band's perspective is that it meant that the investment that each of those three businesses made were not cross-collateralized, meaning that it wasn't recoupable all from one pool. It was recoupable from three different pools, meaning that they could source the income and recoup the income from three different sources, which, as a business, it was very clever. Chris was very clever.
One thing you just said earlier was about you thought Chris might have been playing a little bit. Was it you're thinking like leveraging the release of the single with Don Walker to get the meeting with Warner's? Is that what you were referring to? No,
not necessarily. I think he was just taking advantage of an opportunity to engage. And looking at, as I say, thinking about, because at that time there were 6 major record companies, not 3. So he was probably already doing his research and going, now I'm not doing too well with Deluxe, and they're with RCA, and they're pretty hopeless. So I don't want to be with them. So then there's Festival, there's CBS, there's WEA. This is what they were all called in the day. Festival, well, they've got Mushroom, and I don't want to get near Mushroom. And, so basically he was sort of narrowing it down and probably looking at WEA, which became known as Warner's, as a good option because we were doing so well with local product, and also we were, a market leader. So, and, I have to say, when Chris, from the minute that I met him, the two of us got on very well, and we formed a pretty strong working relationship. And, that's why, I guess, why things work so well, certainly from my perspective, because I got very involved very quickly.
The One Thing, did that lead you to an involvement with The One Thing there?
Well, so they'd already Mark Opus was producing the new album, Shadoo Shafar. He was in the studio with the band when I was having this meeting about freedom, and so within a short space of time, they came in with the finished master of The One Thing, and we were already, well down the line and getting this deal across the line. So then it was like, well, then we're going to release this song, and check out this video that we've just made. And the album will be finished in a month's time, and then we'll schedule that to be released, in 3 months' time. So, yeah, basically this was during the process of them making and finishing the recording of the Shabu Shabar album. And so the One Thing was our first song that we put out by INXS. The Freedom thing didn't do anything. The film was a dud. The soundtrack went out. A couple of people wrote something nice about it because it was really good, but it never got airplay. It never, nothing ever happened. But the One Thing certainly happened. It was a big success, and it paved the way for the Shabu Shabar album to come out, and it was a huge success. And we put a lot of effort into, getting it well positioned in the marketplace. And it was the beginning of a great relationship. And in the meantime, Chris had taken a lot of that, the funds that he'd picked up through the deals that he did with Atlantic and Polygram in Europe and Warner's in Australia, to put the members of the band on the road, not just to tour, but to go off and do little side trips and just get more of a feeling of what the world was like.
Yeah. I think he seemed to learn a lot from sort of probably Cole Chisel's failure to grow internationally. It was quite a sort of a source of motivation for him, wasn't it?
Yes. Look, the interesting thing at the time is that the only successful Australian band that had come out of Australia was AC/DC. So nearly everybody else was struggling. There was a sort of a wave that was happening that INXS were riding at the time, that it also included Midnight Oil and Men at Work, primarily, who all started to have some international success. But yes, I think it was very shrewd. Chris really had a fantastic vision of how to expand the band's horizons and give them more visibility in the international market.
Design-wise, did you have an involvement with anything to do with Shabu Shabar or the One Thing single or whatever there, or you were a bit of a conduit at the time, just with Chris and the label?
I was a conduit. It was early stages. I was just getting to know him and the band. They'd already done the photo sessions and the video shoot for the One Thing and the Shabu Shabar cover. Grant Matthews was the photographer who did the session with Michael for the front cover, and it was their idea. They cooked it up together, and so they basically came in with a bunch of photos, and we just simply helped them lay it out and cut and paste the artwork and get it to the printers.
And I think interestingly, I think with you mentioned Scott Hicks before, went on to direct international film Shine. He sort of directed 3 of the Shabu Shabar film clips. So there was obviously that link between Don Walker and Freedom, and then with INXS being, I think they filmed in Adelaide, where Scott's from,
That's right. One thing leads to another,
It does.
Yes. No. The videos that were shot in Adelaide. So the band went down to Adelaide to shoot a couple of videos, but of course the weather wasn't really that good. So the intended shoot out in the desert for Don't Change turned into a shoot in a hangar where the planes were kept. Yes. But it still worked. I mean, it was terrific stuff, and the creative process for Shabu Shabar was a bunch of loose ends that were all sort of brought together because that video that was shot for the One Thing was done well before all the other stuff, so it was sort of one step.
Yeah, well, I think B and I, when we spoke to Mark Opitz, I think he was sort of commissioned with a 3-song sort of template. I think there was the One Thing, Johnson's Aeroplane, and one other where he was sort of, I think commissioned to do, a production on a song, and then
they were trying him out.
Yeah. Probably.
Even though he had big runs on the board already, they were basically going, well, let's see what it's like. I mean, the other sliding door scenario here is that while Mark was still at Warner's prior to him leaving the role as the A&R manager, he signed Richard Clapton to Warner's, Richard having been with Festival Records for the first 5 or 6 albums of his career. And Richard came over to Warner's and went straight into the studio with Mark producing and recorded an album called The Great Escape, which essentially has a combination of the members of Cole Chisel and INXS playing all the instruments.
Yeah.
It's a great album, and I worked very closely with Richard on that. I did the album cover for that, and the videos we commissioned, and the marketing and so forth. And I went to the studio a few times while there were recordings. I remember meeting Gary and John, the drummer. I started to get to know members of INXS through these these connections.
So, yeah, and Richard had just come off recording producing their second album, Underneath the Colours. So it's all these sort of synergies, I guess.
That's right.
To connect and things. Did you want to ask something?
No, I'm just fascinated listening. This is just also, I mean, I've read Story to Story, and some of this is in Story to Story, but you're just bringing it like this 3-dimensional thing to life now. It's just fantastic to hear it from somebody who was there and from the beginning.
Obviously, then led to you getting involved with the Swing album and the cover and the artwork and the interiors there. Just maybe for background purposes, how did that all evolve to that and sort of commence?
Well, one thing that you're no doubt aware of is that this band toured relentlessly. And Chris, and Gary Grant, who was the tour manager or co-manager at the time, I forget the exact sort of timing of all that, but basically that band was on the road all the time. Yes, they had a few breaks here and there, do a bit of recording, do a bit of songwriting, jump on a plane and go to Europe for a 2-week writing trip. I mean, it was relentless.
I actually saw a video the other day, an interview, and they did 300 shows in 1 year. 300.
I think Kirk still has his diaries. Which document every. And actually, when I saw Kirk a few months ago, I said to him, you should do something with those diaries because, I mean, not publish them per se, but, the statistics that are in those diaries would be astounding for anybody, for an artist this day and age to look at that and go, so that's what it takes.
Yeah.
It's the classic 10,000 hours scenario, where the more mileage that you do, the better you get. And so the point I'm making is that, when the band were very rarely in town and very rarely, at home, they were always on the road. So fitting things into that was always a logistical nightmare, which includes, recording, making videos and pulling together album and single covers. It was always a challenge as to when and how these things could be done. So when the band were in the UK, and I can't give you exact dates or anything like that, but they did a photo session with a very well-known British photographer, Mike Putland, who, if you looked at any of the English press at the time, he was one of the big British rock photographers. So he did a session with the band, or the band did a session with him. And that session included a group photograph, which you can see on the front cover of the Swing album, and then a whole lot of individual shots of each member of the band goofing around in front of the camera. So basically, Chris gave me this transparency, which was a large format transparency of the band. Here's the group photo, and it's sort of had this lovely treated sort of look about it with sort of this blotchy sort of color look to it. And here's all these other photos, and it was proof sheets of the black and white photographs of each member of the band. He said, see if you can make something of this. So I mean, it wasn't really, that complicated. It was basically, okay, I sort of got this transparency of the band, popped it on the light box, and then I started to imagine, using that as the concept for then, expanding it. So, yeah, then it was just a question of, what objects that you put in there to sort of, taking into account that, the band had already been to Japan to do the videos for The One Thing, for Original Sin.
And send a message, I think, as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I sent a message. So there was this Japanese thing going on, we just sort of already made. And so I thought, well, we should have some Japanese things in there,
Yeah.
Well,
I think,
I must admit, when we were looking at it, we're like, what is going on with this? But like now that I've spoken to you, I understand it's more like you say, it's like a journal of things that they'd been around into Japan, and that was like a passport sort of thing going on.
Yes, and Kirk was, Kirk and I would talk about photography when we were together. So, I said, well, give me some of your photographs so I can, include this. So then some of his slides, transparencies, I put on but he didn't give me many. So I sort of searched through my collection, and because of this whole idea of, INXS being an international band, I mean, this is so conceptually discussions that I had with Chris was like, let's not brand INXS as an Australian band. Let's not, that's what Men at Work are doing, because they've got Down Under out and they're an Aussie band, and they have a kangaroo flag pinned up behind the band when they're playing, on tour in America. INXS are not going to be known as an Australian band. They're going to be known as an international band.
Yeah.
So,
which ultimately was a long-term great strategy.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. So I have to admit that in my own small way, I sort of was thinking along those lines when I was helping them put together their visualization of their stuff, is that, let's not be too parochial here. Let's try
I mean, it's such an interesting thing. And I think, part of our listener audience and the fact that the band went on to sort of global acclaim, that was such an important thing, because what people can remember, and you probably do, Philip, very well, is also between 83 and 86, Australia was like the in thing culturally overseas, with both the America's Cup win. We had Crocodile Dundee. We had Men at Work with their kitschy sort of Australian references. And we were starting to get a bit more of a global recognition, but it was on the back of a bit of a cultural cringe. That, in hindsight, probably hasn't aged well. So
you're absolutely right, and that's exactly why Chris was right to sort of make that point. It's like let's not advertise that. I mean, not hide it, but don't wear it on your sleeve, kind of thing. It's not. Yeah, no, 100%. And one of the things which just to sideline a little bit is that as a kid, getting that album and the album cover, whatever, it was quite fascinating. And I said on the last podcast, maybe 2 podcasts ago, that lyrics weren't a big thing in the sort of 70s, 80s to put on an album. I mean, as an art creator, the Swing album, when you open up inside, we spoke about this last week, we thought the photo, and look, hands up, we thought the photos of the band had aged badly
on the fronts
with their portraits, but it wasn't. But we loved the interior and just the fascination. I think it was the most fascinating interior and just album to discover. And in the late 80s, early 90s, when lyrics became a thing on inside album sleeves, it took maybe some creativity away from maybe the artists like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
Look, it was a great situation to be in that we'd had so much success with Shaboosh Bar. We were listening to the songs that had been recorded for the Swing album, and we'd already put out Original Sin as the first single, and it was huge. And in fact, it was the first song the band had success with internationally. It went to number 1 in France,
right.
And then that sort of helped to buoy the Polygram people in Europe to go, okay, we've got something serious here. So it meant that we could indulge in spending a bit more money on the album cover and the single covers, which is exactly what Chris wanted, because it incentivizes people to buy records if they look and feel like
now, this is an album that, let's just for credit to Philip here, this album took INXS from an emerging band in Australia really to the top of the tree with Midnight Oil. They had, I think, 10 to 1 out the same year, maybe a year earlier. But we're talking 300,000 plus sales in the 80s.
Huge. It was huge.
They climbed just from sort of emerging band to something massive. How did it change your life at the time?
It was amazing in that, working in a record company, you're just to a lot of artists, you're dismissed as just being somebody that works for a record company. But to be the creative person in a record company and actually have your work, on display,
everywhere.
It's good for the ego. I have to say at the same time, my life was it was such an intense period of time for me. My wife.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking, then, Philip?
Young.
Came out.
Yeah, I was younger.
84. We'll go 84 here. Yeah, 1984. That is.
Yeah, I was 28.
Wow.
And,
okay.
So I had started at Warner's when I was 19, and by this stage, my wife and I had our first child in '84.
Wow.
And we had 2 more boys in the next couple of years. So we had 3 children under 3. It was intense, and at the same time, not that I could tell anyone at the time, but I got phone calls from people like Michael Gudinski asking me to do record covers for their artists.
Oh, poached.
Which I did. I did a number of, and I loved doing it.
Name a couple quickly that you did.
Yeah, which
under
ones?
the Gudinski stable. Yeah.
Well, the best one, the most well known one, is the Models Out of Mind, Out of Sight.
Great.
Or Out of Sight, Out of Mind. I always get it wrong. I did that one. I did one for a band called Diddy Smashed, which was Dave Dobbin's band, called The Optimist.
Now, B, that's the song Slice of Heaven from Foot Rot Flats. That was Dave Dobbin, Diddy Smash.
Yeah.
So if you know that song, that was a New Zealand band that probably struggled to make it here, but they were very big in New Zealand, weren't they, Philip?
Yes, unfortunately, Diddy Smash never really. When Gudinski called me, he said, we've been struggling with this band for years, and we just haven't got. But I think this album that they're making now is really good, and I really want a good cover. Can you do it for me? And unfortunately, that album didn't do what Gudinski hoped it would, and so he dropped the band. And then Dave Dobbin then got commissioned to do the soundtrack to the cartoon Foot Rot Flats, which is where Slice of Heaven came from. So Dave's success sort of came later, but nevertheless, an amazing talent. He's one of New Zealand's best.
Yes.
So at the time, yes, I was getting asked by people that I was associated with within the sort of Warner world and also outside to sort of help out with things. And frankly, that's why I got into the business. I was somebody that was passionate about music but loved doing record covers.
The art, yeah.
If we move to Listen Like Thieves, now this is an album that obviously probably broke, INXS in America in terms of a top 5 single with What You Need. The cover itself, tell us a little about the inspiration behind that and how that came together.
All right. Well, I'm going to preface that by saying that another amazing thing happened with the band during the swing. I mean, the swing album, apart from Original Sin, was produced by Nick Launay, who also produced Midnight Oil's 10 to 1 and also produced some of the Models. So, he was a fantastic British producer who was out here doing a lot of great work. But also Michael Hutchins and Richard Lowenstein became friends, and Richard then swung into doing music videos for INXS. Pretty sure the first one was Burn For You, where he jumped on a plane and went up to where the band was touring at the time, because they were always on the road, and filmed
Amazing Run Through the Jungle.
running through mangrove swamps up at and Richard's partner at the time was Lynn Marie Milburn, who was a fantastic animator. So every video that Richard made at the time, Lynn Marie was very much a part of that. Doesn't get credited enough. If you look at the video for What You Need, that's a whole lot of still images shot in the studio with the band and then hand drawn every frame by Lynn. And with Burn For You, the same thing. There were lovely little animated bits that were thrown in there. So I was back at home base at Warner's, getting these videos and getting images and so forth. And so I was reacting to the work that Richard and Lynn did. So the single covers for the singles off the swing, I would take the images that were in the video and then try and incorporate them into the overall concept of the album cover. So I don't have a show and tell here, but basically, if you look at the cover for Burn For You, for instance, it's got the fish from the
yes.
But then it's got a sort of a crayon drawing that I did of an image of Kirk playing the guitar from the Burn For You video. I mean,
the acoustic,
So it's all about, and this is pre-digital, so it's all about mixed media, but in a very sort of organic kind of way.
They created a narrative like theme going through, didn't they? Those singles into the album and that. Yeah.
Well, and, each time you would put a new song out from an album, or when you put a new album out, as a record company, you would print up point of sale material that will go up in record shops around the country. And in my case, I was producing material that would then be sent off to Atlantic in America for them to use, and then off to Polygram in Europe for them to use. And Warner's in Japan, who did their own thing as well. So everything that I started with, whether it be a single cover or an album cover, that we would then package everything up, like the parts, and then we post them off to the record companies, and then they would receive them and then do their own interpretations of them. Sometimes exactly the way we did them here, or they would. So, for instance, The Swing was released in Europe as a single cover, not a double cover. Oh. Right. So Polygram thought, well, they're not big enough yet to have a gatefold sleeve, so we'll forget all this shit inside and we'll just have it.
Which is probably the reason why I didn't get to see it until I was here, actually. Because I would have had the European one, yeah.
Well, yeah, but also it's interesting. I'm sure you've touched on this in your podcast. INXS didn't break in the UK till after nearly every other territory in the world. Yes. I mean, people knew who they were, but they didn't have the success that they were having in other markets there until much later, until after till Kick happened.
I think it's such a classic cover, Listen Like Thieves. It's beautiful.
Well, it was Plan B. Plan A was that because they said, we want you to design the album. Thank you very much, and so come to us with your ideas. We're planning on calling it Listen Like Thieves. I came up with an idea, and I actually did drawings, and I actually did a recce, a photo shoot recce to a location where I wanted to shoot it. Which was located in the so-called high mountain country of Australia, down near Perisher. So I planned to shoot the band in this sort of wilderness to create the photos that would be the cover of Listen Like Thieves. And as I say, I did drawings and I presented to Chris and the band, and they all thought it was a good idea. And then I went down with my photographer friend Paul Clark to do a photo recce down there. But anyway, as it turned out, the weather turned, and the band had a small window to back in Australia before they went on tour again. So we just couldn't do the photo shoot. It was just too hard.
Yeah.
So Plan B was I went on the road with them for about a week down in Victoria. They played a few regional cities, Ballarat and Shepparton, and I forget the other cities. And I was literally on the road with them for about a week. And I took a whole lot of photographs of them, mainly live images. And they were in a twin-engine plane going from town to town, and I was in a hire car driving. So the photograph on the back is a photo that I took while I was driving between Ballarat and Shepparton of the sun setting.
Yeah, it's beautiful purple sort of skyline shots, Yeah.
And then the front cover image is quite obviously Michael, on stage with his
Watch the World Argue T-shirt on, isn't it?
Yeah, the Watch the World Argue T-shirt, which somebody had made for him, and he wore every day for like a year until it
fell off.
Yeah. But the idea, and this is all pre-digital again, was to sort of try and create something that was not it wasn't intended for it to look like a live thing. It was intended to sort of be kind of abstract, and to just use the stencil of INXS as the sort of the front cover. With some kind of image showing through it. And I wanted the image to be sort of iridescent, to sort of have a glowing sort of quality to it. So what I ended up doing was putting the image of the back cover, the purple sunset, and then combining that with the live image of Michael with the spotlight behind him to create so that it doesn't really look like it, but that's how it sort of gave it. And I went to this place that did all the scanning, and I got them to scan the two and sort of position the two. It took took ridiculous amount of this to think of how quickly you can cut and paste things and do things in Photoshop now
It's amazing.
compared to what we were doing. And then you'll notice that on the Swing and on the Listen Like Thieves album, all of the typography is done by hand. So that's, I bought these Japanese calligraphy brushes.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm looking at the right-hand corner just at the moment, and when we were doing the album covers the other week, it felt like this sort of Japanesey type extension of such to the naked eye.
Well,
yeah.
So it was a Japanese calligraphy brush, not one that you dip in ink, but it's you just squeeze the pen and the ink flows into the nib, and you can sort of do all this. So for the Swing, I sort of did it sort of like that, and then for Listen Like Thieves, I sort of did it sort of in a much more stylistic kind of way. So that the title and the band's, the title down the bottom is that Listen Like Thieves written with the calligraphy brush. Then we put an image of Michael into the type, a blurry image,
Yeah.
So once, or maybe it wasn't Michael, maybe it was somebody else in the band, but, I sort of basically just took a whole lot of close-ups of blurry images of them live to sort of try and get all these abstract images.
Quick two-parter for you. Chris Thomas, who sort of coveted the band, I think, globally, and was very keen to record with them, felt that the band had never quite produced a sound on their albums that took into account their excellence sort of in a live setting. And as you said earlier, you didn't deliberately set out to do that, but I always felt the cover with Michael there almost looks like he's on stage in that silhouette version, and it has that live feel to it. Second part to that is the name INXS must be a designer's sort of logo dream to try and come up with some interesting concepts art-wise, because it's not, it's not supercalifragilistic expialidocious inside. Am I correct in that assertion?
It's graphically nice to look at, isn't it? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, it gives you scope because it's broad and it's sort of almost an acronym in a way, but it's a play on letters. But
look, I'll tell you a little aside on the name. So when we did Shabu Shabar, and Atlantic Records were putting it out in the States, they insisted on putting a sticker on the album cover that said pronounced INXS. It's INXS. Because they thought that people were too stupid to look at, INXS and realize that it was actually INXS.
I'm probably right.
And look, interestingly, something I've neglected to mention regarding that, and that is that, the Shabu Shabar album did very well in Australia. It didn't really do very much elsewhere. I mean, it made a bit of a noise wherever the band went to do touring, because, they picked up fans and fans picked up the album, but they didn't really have that much success. So there was a lot of pressure on Chris to market the band with their looks. So that's why he got the photo done, the Mike Putland photograph, and that's why he handed it to me and said, we have to put this on the cover, because I'm getting pressure from the American label and from the Europeans, I think, as well, to have the band on the cover, right? So if you recall, when you were going through your analysis of all the album covers, the first album cover and the second album cover were paintings.
Yes.
It's picked by by Chris Murphy. He really did have quite a strong handle on things like this, the direction of things. And in fact, most of what I did with INXS was through Chris. Chris was the guiding, I mean, he was a manager in more ways than one. And then you get to Listen Like Thieves, and he said, don't worry about putting the band on the front, we'll be fine, just, keep going with what you've got in mind. I actually had images that I had taken of the band live across the bottom of the back cover, that sunset shot in the dark bottom half. I had sort of ghostly images of each member of the band. I remember going out to the airport to meet with the band when they were in transit from one city to another to have a meeting with them in the Qantas, lounge. And I'm pretty sure it was Andrew who said, I'm sick of seeing pictures of me behind keyboards, and this I don't like the vibe about, so we basically scrapped those images that I had there, and then we found the black and white photograph, the sepia photograph that we put in on the back. And so it was a way of sort of balancing that pressure from the US company in particular to have the band on the cover, but also try and have it sort of artistically suiting the way we wanted to convey the record. And interestingly, if you look at what happened next, the friendship that Michael formed with Nick Egan being the kind of commercial artist that he is, and the pressure continuing to come down hard from the international labels, certainly not from Australia, to have the band on the cover, Kick was the perfect convergence of those requirements.
Very clever album.
Yeah, because nowadays, you'd think for almost 6 albums, albeit The Swing being the only one we're on the cover, no label would tolerate, not doing that these days. I guess there was an artistic expression that was allowed in these days back when you were doing this.
Oh, look, it all came down to how successful the band or the artist was, as to how much they could dictate as to what their art was going to look like. And look, it was interesting, when I first started at Warner's in the art department, and the art director that I was working for, would have the headache constantly of having to try and convert these extraordinary record covers that were coming in from overseas to get manufactured and put out in Australia without compromising what had been dictated to us. So as an example, Atlantic Records had Led Zeppelin, and Led Zeppelin, for their first couple of albums, they were pretty standard sort of record covers. But, because they became one of the biggest bands that Atlantic had, their manager, Peter Grant, insisted that they have the album covers that he and the band wanted, and they commissioned a British company called Hypnosis to do those covers. So if you know the albums that I'm talking about, Led Zeppelin 3, which has a spinning wheel inside it, costs lots of money. And then album 4 there's absolutely no mention of the band's name or the album's title.
And that's their biggest seller, I think, isn't it? Led Zeppelin 4, I think.
And then the following one, Physical Graffiti, had all these cutouts, and Atlantic Records was the label that the Rolling Stones went to with their Sticky Fingers album, which had the Andy Warhol zip on the front. These were ridiculously indulgent and expensive record covers, but they were by artists that could dictate, that's what they wanted, and the record company has to spend that kind of money. There were probably deals done behind the scenes, like, well, the packaging deduction on this is going to be that much higher or whatever. And I'm pretty sure we probably did the same with INXS. I can't really recall. But, Chris quite wisely wanted the INXS albums and singles to be deluxe, to be of the highest grade. So therefore we indulged, if you've seen some of the single covers that we did for these 2 albums in particular, there was the single cover we did for Kiss the Dirt was a multi, I think it was a 6-panel fold out. And the beauty of that is that, when you put that into the stores the week of release, the fans will rush out and buy it because it was limited edition. If you didn't buy it the first week of release, then you might never be able to get it at all. And so therefore you would guarantee a high chart position because the sales were so good in the first week. So it's marketing.
Yeah.
This is Sheila from Birmingham, Alabama. This is Susan from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hi, this is Maite from Montreal, Canada.
This is Suzanne from Los Angeles, California. And that's a wrap.
Well, that's a wrap, B. What a lot of fun was talking to Philip today. And I know we're going to be possibly extra footage there, so we might have to move some into next week. But he was fascinating today, wasn't he?
So fascinating. I could listen to him all day. What a gentleman. What a gentleman. Yeah, and still really working.
Really articulate, succinct, measured, informative. I mean, just a dream guest. And just by the way, Philip, we have a 2-3 episode appearance thing where you might become an honorary patron. So we will keep that out there for you. But yes, thank you. He was a true gentleman today. All right. Well, getting into fan engagement, B, we've had quite a big week of fan engagement from everybody from some new patrons through to some of the various platforms. I think I even might have responded out to a gentleman standing in Malaysia this week who was part of a podcast series. You know more about who runs what and things.
So is he from a podcast, that guy?
So not a podcast, from a platform, maybe from a Facebook page group in Malaysia.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I got them mixed up, actually. I thought that was Jason's page. There's so many. In fact, Hayden, I would like to give a big shout out to a couple of Facebook pages that help us with getting this message out of the mission that we've got in getting INXS into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So there's I've done the top 10 list and some of their admin. So there's a really cute page called the Hutches. Have you ever seen them, Hayden?
I have, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
They've been around, and that's by a lady called Kelly. So thank you, Kelly, for allowing us to help get the message out. There's the Michael Hutchence fan club. We don't know who that's by, unfortunately. And then there's the Michael Hutchence INXS Calling All Nations by Claudia. The Michael Hutchence with Love, that's a collective of admins. Then we've got Faris Hutchence, Pengilly and Beers by Renee. We've got INXS fans, Hutch Nation. That's me and my lovely crew with Joe Robbins and Carrie Ann and Priscilla and Nadine. Then we've got the INXS Club by Michael. We've got INXS Fans Worldwide by Jason Hughes. Michael Hutchence and His Legacy, that's by Jimmy Guest. We've got INXS and Michael Hutchence, that's by the Argentinian gang. Hi, guys. I know you love those, don't you, Hayden? And then we've got Australian INXS stroke Michael Hutchence, that's Nancy and Janet. And then the big one, which is Michael Hutchence of INXS, you are and still are a rock god. Of course he is. And that is a massive group. They've got something like 12,000 followers. And that was by my mate, Matt Brown. Now, Matt's doesn't do the page so much now, but he's quite active. So well done, Matt, for getting that page together. It rocks.
Well, my little friend was who mentioned about Malaysia earlier was Masrul Hisham, and Masrul's standing below the sort of I guess those twin towers in Kuala Lumpur, and he's part of the INXS Alive public group or fan page group. Have you heard of them, INXS Alive?
Oh yes, I have. Yeah,
they got 1,200 members, and he was just, I think, posting within that group. So so kudos to him and just everybody who's sort of been communicating with him. I know, part of the fun of being in communities like this is the chance to sort of, as I said, chat to people with a like-minded interest and, obviously experiences with the band and concerts and songs and everyone seems to have access to different footage. I mean, I'm posting stuff, onto our patron page that I've found from others, but it's all open to sharing because it's all about pushing the band forward and entertaining, because there's some great little posts and things. There was one the other week that I'd forgotten completely about. It was that Welcome to Wherever You Are 15-minute sort of little promo tape or promo video of the band at the Concert for Life and just the lead up to that. And I hadn't seen that for 20 years,
Yeah. No, some good stuff out there, isn't there? Some really good stuff. I want to speak about Dodge 69 from last week. Do you remember when we were talking about that? And I said, listen to this guy. So he calls himself the Ace, and he's pretty cool. And
Ace, thanks.
Anyway, I think I like him. He likes us.
Does your husband James know about that? That was rather sultry, I think. You sounded like them. What? It was like Dick Emery. You were like
Dick Henry.
Yeah, do you remember I'm naughty? I think I like you. Do you remember the Henry show?
You are naughty, but I like you.
Yeah,
that's about right, actually. That's probably my my line.
The Americans won't know what we're talking about here.
Hello.
A famous British show in the 70s. Anyway, keep going.
Remember him? He used to dress up as a woman, didn't he?
He did.
A lot of old men used to dress up as women and get a show out of it. What was that all about?
Let's straighten up, okay?
All right, okay.
We've had Glenn, who's made a bit of a tsunami entry into our podcast group and our Patreon group.
He is just like on every level of awesomeness. He has loved the band via Pour Jolie, drumming out Don't Change, and he was like, transfix, this is it, and it's his band. And now he's spilling onto our Patreon pages all the lovely photographs he's had taken with the band.
Yeah, a couple couple of quick things, just a bit of housekeeping. The newsletter, how do people get that, B? Because I see people through our emails seemingly subscribing. What's the process of being able to get that sent out to you weekly?
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's really, really doing well, the newsletter. The best way to subscribe to the newsletter is through our website. So our website is INXSAccessSportAreas.com, and just go to the newsletter page and there you are. There's a link there that will take you straight through. You just fill out the form and then we'll just pop it into your email once a week. Now, I do believe some people might be missing it because it does sometimes go to your spam folder. So you might need to adjust your settings for that if you want that to come through. But yeah, a weekly newsletter, and it's jam-packed with some good facts. And
it'll take you back in time. This time 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago at INXS. It'll talk about the upcoming podcast episode.
Yeah.
Competitions, auctions, merchandise, patron information.
And a snapshot.
Fan of the week or patron of the week. I mean, it's a great little read. So kudos to the girls there. Also, too, B, I'm being very research this week. I believe T-shirts are on their way. Is that right?
Oh, my goodness. I thought this was going to be a quick process, but it isn't. So literally, in a nutshell, I've just had an email and she said they might be ready today to be picked up. Woohoo! So
what are the T-shirts? Are they?
So thank you everyone who's bought them and have been waiting for them. I know that you're eager to get them. They will be on the way by the end of this week.
Now, these T-shirts with you and the big glasses on that big rock chick photo shoot, aren't they? Is that right? No?
No.
No, okay. Are these avatars of us?
There's avatars of us. It's our logo, darling.
Right, okay. All right.
I've also not just done the logo. I've actually done it's like the waveform as well. That's pretty cool as well. So it's like a play button. So I've called them play siglets. And
what do we sell them for, B?
I think the T-shirts are around about $40 and the caps are $28 and the singlets are $35.
Great. And about 10-15% of that goes towards our profit for the podcast, or, the revenue for the podcast. I guess there's a cost in putting all this together. But a little bit of the profit we make goes into the podcast. So we do appreciate anything you do in that regard. I know with our auction, we've had some fantastic, fan packs and prize packs and by my side releases and things. Just an update on the auction, B.
Update on the auction is we have got the crew T-shirt still going at the moment. So that's doing really well. In the first 3 days, it went all the way up. I'm knocking on someone's door to get another box from another member of the band.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll have some real nice crisp new stuff coming our way soon as well.
Yeah. Speaking of such, we are aiming to get another band member on over the next 2-3 weeks.
2 band members.
Well, I'm lowballing here at the moment, B.
All right, okay. I've just thrown it in too.
You talk blue sky, I talk sort of clouds and some overcast cumulus nimbus.
I know you do.
So we are aiming to get a band member on soon. Well, 2 is a positive, but that would be exciting. So we will know more once we get confirmation. We have an upcoming episode with the Welcome to Wherever You Are album review in the next 2-3 weeks as well. So that is definitely coming. I just realised, B, in the last 12 months, we've only reviewed 2 albums.
Really?
It was X and Live Baby Live, I think. So we sort of got through the first few rather quickly, but I'm
liking the pace, mate.
Okay. So that's sort of something that's going to be coming up as well. But we thought in light of Philip being on today, B, he had such, there's a couple of anecdotes that I do know that are particularly pertinent to him. Now, some of it maybe have come through sort of the episode today and some may come through next week as well. But we do know that he had quite an intrinsic sort of role in the early days of having Chris Murphy meet, I guess, Warners and, Don Walker and all those different sort of people in terms of sort of proximity to one another and Cole Chisel. So we thought we would go out today with a couple of songs, one being the rather uniquely less well-known song called Speed Kills, where Michael does the vocals, and it's sort of a Cole Chisel, Don Walker written song for the movie Freedom. It's got a great little hook and a chorus. Just hang in there. It does sort of pay you back in dividends if you give it 2 or 3 listens. And the second one, which is very, very intrinsic to sort of, I think, that outdoory feeling vibe, Australiana of what Listen Like Thieves was in terms of a lot of the artwork and things and the film clips. It was Kiss the Dirt, which was a particularly poignant one for Philip and a fan favourite and a song that goes under the radar sometimes, but I know has a lot of interest out there. I think one of our patrons last week on the Zoom call, loves Kiss the Dirt. So it's almost an ode to her as well. But we will go out with a double shot of Speak Hills and Kiss the Dirt as we say goodbye. It's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from B. Goodbye, everybody.